My name is Lakeisha Beeler. I'm going to be the facilitator. Now, if this is your first paralegal power break, it's quick. It's only 15 minutes. It's meant to provide a lot of useful information in a short period of time. So afterwards, you'll have access to this recording, the slides, and also some resources. Now, this particular power break is an ethics inventory. So in this session, we're going to discuss two issues, ethical issues that are really serious. And although there's a lot of ethical issues and concerns to deal with, this is a short period of time, so I decided to focus on client communication issues and billing issues because they can lead to not just issues for yourself, but for the attorney that you work for and or the organization you work for. So we're going to discuss client communication issues, billing issues, and then strategies to avoid ethical dilemmas as a paralegal, because that can be very difficult when you're working somewhere where there might be some ethical dilemmas that are going on, or there might be a difference in how you would handle something and how, you know, your manager or the attorney at the firm would handle something. So there's just going to be some quick strategies and tips at the end that can help you if you're dealing with any of those particular issues. So first, communication ethics. Now, paralegals do not belong to any, are not required to belong to any professional organization or even to be licensed. So with that, a paralegal has to be diligent and proactive with ethics. And one way is by joining a paralegal association. Another is just by knowing what the rules are. So these particular rules are different associations. 4 of the main paralegal association, and then the American Bar Association, their model guidelines for the utilization of paralegal services. Although it's written for attorneys, it's good for paralegals to know what they are because it's addressing the issues regarding a paralegal's employment with an attorney. So this guideline that you'll see here now, Guideline 6, states that a lawyer is responsible for taking reasonable measures to ensure that all client confidences are preserved by a paralegal. But you want to take responsibility for your own career, your own actions, and make sure that you are keeping client confidences, that you're not divulging any information that's private or handling information that in a way that is adverse to your organization, your firm, the attorney you're working for, that's breaching any ethical rules, because although you may not have to adhere to certain rules because of association you belong to, attorneys do. So you may be putting them at risk if you are not adhering to various ethical considerations. Now, these other ones listed here, they're ethical standards dealing with communication for the 4 major paralegal associations in the United States. So the first is AAPI, which is the American Alliance of Paralegals, Inc., and their ethical standards that deals with communication is ethical standard number 2. And then you have NALA, the National Association of Legal Assistants. Their canon number 7 deals with client communication issues specific to paralegals. And then NALS, the National Association of Legal Assistants, has canon number 4, which deals with client communication issues. And then NFPA, which is the National Federation of Paralegal Association, has ethical consideration 1.5A, which deals with client communication. So this is a really important ethical standard to know. So even if you're not a member of a paralegal association, it's good to locate these, read them, and see what they are. Afterwards, you'll receive links to all of these different associations so you can take a look at what the ethical standards are. Another thing to keep in mind as a paralegal is the unauthorized practice of law. When you're even though you may be employed by an attorney, when you're communicating with clients, you may breach an ethical standard by giving what can be construed as advice. If a client is asking you a question that requires legal analysis or advice, then it's important to make sure you let the client know that you can't give them that information, pass their question on to an attorney, either have the attorney contact them back, or once the attorney gives you that information, relay the information that the attorney gives to you to the client, because this can be a real sticky place when you're in areas where you have a lot, in a practice area where you have a lot of interaction with the client. Like if you're doing bankruptcies, family law, you can be the person that the client speaks with and deals with pretty much 99% of the time. So this is something, good rule to keep in your knowledge bank and at the forefront of how you're handling communication with clients. Another big issue to deal with, to know about the ethical rules concerning it, is billing issues, billing ethics. You know, you'll see a lot of times in the news where firms are getting sanctioned by the court and a lot of other issues because of how they handle the billing with clients. And as a paralegal, the interesting thing about a paralegal is that paralegal is placed in a position where they're doing the work that an attorney would normally do, but at a lower cost. But with that said, a paralegal can only bill certain things to a client. So if a paralegal is in a firm where they're doing secretarial work, although they are a paralegal, they have the role and the title as a paralegal, that time cannot be billed back to the client because it's clerical in nature. So if you're filing, because that's part of your job, or you're scheduling meetings, that's considered like secretary or clerical work. So regardless if your title is a paralegal, you can't bill that time back to a client. So these are some rules that specifically deal with billing issues related to paralegals. You have ABA, their guideline 8. It discusses charges and fees for paralegals. The AAPI has ethical standards 6, and it pretty much just talks about maintaining integrity, you know, making sure you're not double billing clients. If you have to keep track of your time so that it can be billed back to client and you forget, and at the end of the day or the week, you go back and try to retrace your steps and you're just filling in time and you're just doing these really big liberal numbers. You want to be careful of that, because what you may be doing is double billing a client. You may be billing them for some more time. And if you have a savvy client, or even if the case goes to court and that's something that's looked at as far as the billing, that may come into question. So, you know, again, AAPI, their ethical standard 6 deals with just maintaining integrity overall, period, in your career as a paralegal. NALA has Canon 9, which just states, you know, pretty much the same thing as AAPI, which states that, you know, for a paralegal to do all things for the attainment of ethics. And then NALS has Canon number 2, which states that a paralegal must maintain a high degree of integrity. Now, you'll see here that I don't have NFPA's canon or rule dealing with billing. I specifically, when you log in and get the information in the slides afterwards, the rule it's written out. You can click on that. Believe it's the first link. It'll actually tell you what it is. And the reason why that was done is because all the rest of these rules is very general. It's just talking about charges and fees and maintaining integrity. NFPA's is very detailed, and just for, you know, time purposes, I didn't want to go into it here, but it would be a good idea to go and look at it because it specifically deals with billings and paralegal, and it's very specific. It's not just talking about integrity. It's talking about how to handle billing dilemmas ethically and just dealing with billing ethically. So again, when you log in afterward, you can take a look at that, or just do a Google search of the National Federation of Paralegals Association, their model guidelines, and look for it. I believe it's their ethical standard. I believe it's like 1.2, and there's 3 separate sections that deal with it. So you can take a look at that. But again, I would suggest looking at theirs because it is very specific as it deals with billing. Now, because we touched on just 2, and there's different ethical considerations to keep in mind as a paralegal, because you have to govern yourself and govern your own career. If you don't belong to Paralegal Association, and even if you do, it's voluntary. It's not like an attorney. It's not like if you do something, someone can, you know, has any real recourse against you, or that your career is at stake. So you have to govern yourself And, you know, you have to be careful, one, of what you do, because what you do is not just about you and your career. It's also about the attorney you're working for in the firm. So these are just some tips on how you can avoid ethical issues, you know, for yourself and then for the organization or attorney you're working for. And one is just to know the applicable rules. I gave you 5 organizations where you can go look at their rules and adhere to, because they're pretty similar, you know, just adhere to them and make sure that you're keeping them in mind when you're dealing with particular issues or aspects of your career. And then another is to locate your managing attorney's model rules of professional conduct. Go to the state bar, whatever state you're in, and locate the rules for the attorneys, because you want to know what those are so that you make sure that you're not breaching anything. Like we're talking about client confidences, like are you in LinkedIn or talking to your friend after work because you're mad and you're venting and you're giving some detailed information about a case. You know, these are things that you have to keep in mind when you're working as a paralegal. So you want to locate your managing attorney's model rules of professional conduct for your state. A good place to go, American Bar Association. They have a map which you can locate the state bar for your particular state, or just find the ABA's model rules of professional conduct for attorneys. Even though it's a voluntary association, all states except for California model their professional conduct rules after them. So if you know theirs, you pretty much are going to know your state. Even if you're in California, they're very similar. And so that's a good way to start, just knowing what the rules are, finding your attorney's rules of professional conduct. Join a paralegal association. You need some extra, if you need that extra accountability in your career, then joining a paralegal professional association, another legal professional association, would be good and helpful in your career. And then don't discuss cases outside of the office. LinkedIn, social media is huge right now, and you hear all the time where attorneys do it. You know, they might get mad at a verdict in a court case and make a comment about a judge and end up getting sanctioned, getting in trouble for it. You know, so you have to be careful of what you're saying as you're working on cases and matters, because it can cause some issues, not just for yourself in your career, but for your firm and organization. And then just being courageous, you know, because ethics, you know, everybody wants to think that they have them. You know, ethics is interesting, for lack of a better word, because it can differ sometimes. And so that's why it's good to go to associations in a place to look and see what they are, and don't make them up for yourself. And then being courageous means sometimes your ethics may not be the same as your firm or your organization. You know, you may be asked to do something that you know is going to breach some kind of ethical standard, and it may be very difficult for you to be able to stand up to an attorney or someone and tell them, well, no, I'm not going to do that, especially when you know that your job is on the line, or that you're going to have some repercussions in your organization that you work with. So, you know, sticking to your guns is important, because at the end of the day, most likely you're not going to be working at that organization forever. It's very rare where someone works at the same organization for their whole life, and you don't want to be in a position where with the Enron and WorldCom, that whole controversy, people that worked for Arthur Andersen, that was like an accounting scandal that resulted in a law, the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, because of all the ethical issues and legal issues that were going on in that case. Well, there was instances where people that worked at Arthur Andersen, which was the accounting firm, that when they tried to go get jobs somewhere else, they couldn't, because people saw that they worked for Arthur Andersen on their resume, their application, and they wouldn't hire them because they automatically associated them with that controversy that was going on, even if they didn't have anything to do with it. You know, so you want to be careful and understand that what you do at your job can carry over into your career as a whole. So when it's difficult to stick to your guns, when it has to do with ethical issues, that is something to keep in mind, that it may haunt you when you go to your next position, you go to work at another company, if there's ever, you know, some big ethical billing scandal, because it's happened. You see it in the news, or these big billing scandals that happen at these law firms. You know, you don't want to be caught up in anything like that. So anyways, these are just some tips on how to deal with some ethical issues, where some organizations to go to, so you can see what those rules are. And I am going to open it up now for some questions. So if you have any questions or feedback, feel free to ask them now. And again, you will receive some links to the various associations that I mentioned in this session: NALS, NFPA, AAPI, the American Bar Association, NALA, and you can take a look at their ethical rules. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up now. If you wish, you can go ahead and log off. Thank you for your time. Have a great rest of your Wednesday. Have a great rest of your week. Have a great weekend. So thank you again for your time, and I'm going to open it up now for any questions you might have.